And this is the 30th anniversary to the day of the discovery of it. I'm looking at my photocopy of the actual New York Times, not a transcript, but the actual photocopy of the front page. I'm sorry, Washington Post, December 30th, 1983, exactly 33 years ago to the day, today. And the front page article reads, possibly as large as Jupiter, mystery heavenly body discovered. Written by Thomas O'Toole, Washington Post staff writer. Quote, a heavenly body, possibly as large as the giant planet Jupiter and possibly so close to Earth that it would be part of this solar system, has been found in the direction of the constellation Orion by an orbiting telescope aboard the U.S. infrared astronomical satellite. So mysterious. Now, here's where the lies come in. They know it's Planet X, but they're going to lie to you and tell you, well, we really don't know what it is. Okay? Quote, second paragraph. So mysterious is the object that astronomers do not know if it is a planet, a giant comet, a nearby protostar that never got hot enough to become a star. Incidentally, that's what it was. That's what it truly is. It is a protostar that never got hot enough to become a star. Or if it's a distant galaxy, so here's where the baloney comes in, the lies, the deception. Or is it a distant galaxy so young that it is still in the process of forming its first stars, or a galaxy, this is really nonsense, or a galaxy so shrouded in dust that none of the light cast by its stars ever gets through. Well, they had to throw in one piece of truth mixed in with all the other lies, that it indeed is a protostar, that is a baby star. Continuing on, quote, all I can tell you is that we don't know what it is. Dr. Jerry Neugebauer, infrared astronomical satellite chief scientist for California's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and director of the Palomar Observatory for the California Institute of Technology, said in an interview, the most fascinating explanation of this mysterious body is, which is so cold it casts no light and has never been seen by optical telescopes on Earth or in space, is that it is a giant gaseous planet as large as Jupiter and as close to Earth as 50 billion miles. Now, get this. They go on to say, while that may seem like a great distance in earthbound terms, it is a stone's throw in cosmological terms, so close, in fact, that it would be the nearest heavenly body to Earth beyond our outermost planet, Pluto.
And they've been messing around over there by Pluto too. And I've got that article up on my screen for YouTube for everybody to see if they wish. And John, we've got a call. We've got Ira. And folks, if you want to call in, you may at 213-286-1818. You can also call in the old way, 803-392-4566, or our Skype ID, LNM Radio. So many ways for you to get a hold of us. It's just we're trying out a new line here, new phone system, 213-286-1818. Ira, welcome.
Hey, guys. John, great conversation tonight. I'm loving hearing the information from you. You're always a great guest, as always, fascinating. So I just wanted to toss that out there real quick. I'm actually technically just kind of testing out things for Michael, but I did have a legitimate question for you. So one of the questions that I have, and I've talked about this quite a bit over on my shows as well, is, this changing of the sunlight. I remember when I was younger, the sun being much more of a yellowish sun in nature. It had, sort of it was warm, you'd get hot, of course, in the summertime, but it was not like a real searing heat. If I walk outside right now during the summertime, I feel like I'm in a microwave. I am like burning to death. It's like just the skin is crisping on you, as soon as you walk outside. So what is going on in relation to what you're discussing with all of this that is kind of like, happening? Is it doing this in response to an object that's coming in, or is it just a change in the sun?
What a great point. I'm glad you brought that up because I just can't possibly think of everything. And you triggered a very important point. I mean, this is such a blatant, such a conspicuous piece of evidence, and it's so indisputable. so solid. The fact that the sun is definitely blazing hot, hotter than ever before. You're absolutely right. I can't stay out in the sun. I used to be able to, and now I go out my deck without a hat. Oh man, my head starts burning up. I have to put on a hat. If I can't even look. And another thing is you need sunglasses. You cannot go out on a sunny day without sunglasses. You can go blind in a short time, practically. Well, the reason I think is that the sun is hyperactive. The sun has been hyperactive for about off and on ever since the last 15 years, when some of us believe that the planet X actually broke through the heliosphere. The heliosphere is sort of like a huge sphere, way out, great in diameter, and surrounding the entire solar system. This heliosphere is comprised of protons, which are electrified particles. These are hydrogen atoms that have lost their electrons, so they're positively charged. So they call it plasma, actually. All this solar wind that's comprised of protons that is collected, it gets blown out. Just think of the waves on the ocean, where waves keep on hitting the beach and piling up debris on the beach. Well, the waves originated far out, but they wind up piling up at a particular destination, which is the beach, the shoreline. Well, similarly, the sun is like a wave generator, blows out solar winds comprised of electrons and protons. The protons being nearly 2,000 times more heavier. 2 times more, I shouldn't say heavier, it's not the correct scientific word. The protons being nearly 2,000 times more massive than the electron will travel farther out because they have more momentum. So naturally you get a collection of primarily protons in the heliosphere. Now this object came in, it penetrated, we believe, around the year 2003, the heliosphere, and that's taken a long time for it to come in. It started to discharge, but when it penetrated the heliosphere, it caused such a discharge, sort of like a bug zapper. When something gets in between the electrified plates, the high voltage plates of a bug zapper, it reduces the resistance, the electrical resistance, thus allowing the outer one plate to discharge, the negative plate to discharge electrons to the positive plate, or if similarly allows the positive plate to discharge protons to the negative plate. Well, the positive plate of this particular capacitor is the heliosphere out there, comprised of many protons, and that discharge, it was very powerful, abnormally powerful, and that's why you have the abnormal reaction where the sun gets blasted with these beams of electrons, which are called return current sheets, and the currents stimulate the sun to become very hot. And that's sort of a long answer to a short question. The sun becomes very hyperactive, and it's just wonderful that we know about it. We can detect it anyway, even though we're not scientists. So they can't lie to us when we go outside and get burned by the sun.
Yeah.
And get blinded by the sun. We know something is very, very definitely wrong, and I think that's the most shocking and conspicuous piece of evidence that we have.
One of the things I say as far as that...
The sun is hyperactive. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to mention, as far as the heliosphere goes, one of the things that I kind of use to describe it is that it's sort of, you could consider it like the shield around the solar system that the sun is set out to protect itself and what's surrounding it. You know, the inner bodies there in the solar system. It's there as a protective bubble, basically, or a shell. And what I think we see happening is that as this stuff is going on outside of the heliosphere, it's causing the sun to actually condense down that heliosphere to allow it to protect itself further. But that then brings a lot more density into that inner solar system, the solar system that's inside of that heliosphere. Therefore, we're seeing a lot of the other changes that are occurring too.
Yeah, you mean the density of protons within the space between the heliosphere and the sun? Yeah,
yes,
the sun is like sort of, you can think of the sun as like maybe a nugget within a large ball, which is the heliosphere, the solar system surrounded by the heliosphere. So now, you're right, all that plasma from the sun is getting discharged back to the sun, and it's exciting the sun. It's zapping the sun. It's like getting hit with a taser. You jump. The sun is reacting electrically because the sun is the originating electrical generator that's blowing out the solar winds to begin with. Now all that plasma is coming back because it's being discharged back. No longer do you have a separation by the space, the distance of space between the primarily negative sun and the primarily positive heliosphere, but you got a discharging due to these comets coming in, reducing the insulation resistance between the negative sun and the outer heliosphere, positive heliosphere. So that's why you got this activity, and again, that's also the solar hyperactivity, which is causing all this heat and all this intense light, is also blowing winds that hyperactivity is affecting and disturbing our magnetic field, Earth. And that's what I was describing before, which I believe is the source of energy from the sun to our Earth's magnetic field, feeding into the center of the Earth where our solid metal core is located, putting lateral forces on that solid core because magnetic forces do move objects. They can move objects. Putting lateral forces on the center iron core, forcing it off center, causing it to stir our molten iron core more irregularly, causing that roller coaster type jet stream. And when you have a roller coaster like jet stream, you have clashing of cold and hot air at the front, at the margin where that roller coaster occurs. You have this moisture from the Gulf of Mexico being sucked up by that wave, a jet stream. At the same time, it's clashing with the cold air on the other side of the margin of the jet stream. And that's what's the clash between hot moist air from the Gulf of Mexico and the cold air on the other side of the front is what causes this intense weather, the hailstorms, the windstorms, and the disastrous flooding. So you're right, it's the sun, and the sun is it's not the sun's fault. The sun is being excited by incoming objects.
Yeah, it's reactionary, basically.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. I'll let you guys go so that you can get to other questions that I know are coming in. But I definitely appreciate you being on here. And Michael, thanks for having me on, too.
All right. Thank you, Ira.
Thank you, Ira. It's good to hear from you.
I appreciate it. And, John, we've got another call here, this one on our Skype line. We've got 831 area code. You're on Late Night in the Midlands. First name and where you're calling from, please.
Yes, sir. Wolfgang. How can you hear me? Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Yes. Just discovered your show a few weeks back. It's a fantastic show.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch the gentleman's name who's
John Denardo.
doing the research.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, John. Just want to let you know your information is very valid, but I think you're missing one piece of the puzzle.
Tiamat, Tiamat, and it broke in pieces. And according to Sitchin's theory, one piece of Tiamat became planet Earth, and the rest of Tiamat became debris orbiting around where its location was, orbiting around Mars, outside of Mars, Mars's orbital ring, so that this became that post beyond Mars orbit of debris became the asteroid belt, and Earth became a piece of it. Yeah, but that's all we can tell is that we can say we can theorize it, but we don't know. Planet X did come into the solar system, and there's always been an intruder every time it made its periodic intrusion. I suspect it came in at different points in our solar system because the ancients tell us in Sitchin's book, 12 Planet, ancient astronomers from Nineveh and Babylon said that it comes in around the orbit of Jupiter. Now, right now, we don't believe it's coming in around the orbit of Jupiter because what happens is it loops around. It always does loop around. It has to loop around the sun. So if you can see that if it came in around, looped around the sun as close as Jupiter many, many centuries ago. Well, it doesn't come in, it's not coming close to Jupiter right now. It's going way out there. It must be way, way out and making its big U-turn, which is a lazy, slow U-turn around beyond the outer planets, probably beyond Uranus. We have seen signs of the disturbances on planet Saturn and planet Jupiter as this object came in below the ecliptic, causing it to get some of its companion bodies, gravitationally captured bodies, were recaptured by Jupiter, and we saw comet explosions or comet crashes into Jupiter in 2009 and 2010, I believe. But since then, it's come in below, and now it's overshot the sun from the south, overshot, and now it's coming back around way, way out there and making its return. That, incidentally, because it has overshot the sun, that's why everything, all the disturbances on the Earth and the sun sort of quieted down around the year 2009, 2010, because since then, between then and 2016, it was making its big U-turn. I'm theorizing now, based on what we see. But now when it comes back, it's coming back like a slingshot, a big U-turn, and when it comes back, we're going to see increasing natural disasters, which Michael reported we're seeing already with these increasing earthquakes, and so on. Anyway.
Moving along here, a few more questions I want to get to. We did have a call. He dropped off. But caller, if you want to call back in, we'll get you. I've got to get used to this new phone thing. I really do. I got to get a third screen hooked up so I can have everything. I mean, there's so much to look at now. It's incredible. Annie asked, do you know why the sun is rising and setting so far south? And you kind of covered already, why does the sun look so white? That was the second part of her question. But why is the sun rising and setting so far south? I hear people report all the time that it's not rising and setting in the same place. Is that true?
Well, I believe that's true. The Inuit Indians of Alaska, those people live in a terrain where there's not much vegetation. They go do whaling to survive, and those people have to, in order to survive, they have to know where the sun is rising and setting throughout the year. And they're one of the first ones to report about 6-7 years ago that the sun is not rising and setting in the correct places during various points of the year as it should be. So it's absolutely true that it's not, the sun is not, that because the Earth itself is now rotating vertically. It's basically wobbling, I believe. Now, we can tell. This is the ancients, incidentally. You know what Stonehenge was for? I'm not sure if scientists even understand, even today, with all their study of Stonehenge, why it was created, what its purpose was. But I believe that because the stones are so massive, they cannot be moved. You have a fixed, basically a line of an eyesight, a fixed line of vision between the Earth and the sun for any given day of the year. And for particular days of the year, like solstice, there's spring solstice and autumn solstice, I should say winter and summer solstices, you have the sun should be repeatedly, year after year, in the same place as it lines up and shines its rays through the opening of Stonehenge. And those people who, in ancient times, who created Stonehenge wanted a fixed, immovable monument like Stonehenge where they could see for any given day of the year where the sun was coming through, because they knew that when this object, this massive disturbing body comes in, they may not have known that the disturbing body was the actual cause of the disasters, but they knew they had to find out when the Earth was beginning to wobble. So when the Earth wobbles, the sun will no longer shine through the eyesight, more or less, to a particular vantage point. through Stonehenge as that it normally does. And you will then, civilization at that time had an indication as a consequence of that irregularity that there is going to be some kind of disaster occurring, that Earth is going into a wobble. And I think we're having that right now. In fact, the ancients actually had other ways of looking at light shining through a split. And I'm trying to remember where, but there are plenty of places on the Earth where the ancients had these, what they call petroglyphs, where they would watch for the light shining through an opening in rocks that would cast a light or a shadow on a particular point. And this would be a way to index the position of the sun at any given day of the year. And if the Earth is going into a wobble, you're going to have problems. In fact, with the ancient Colburn Bible, have you ever heard of the Colburn, Kolbrin?
Yes, I have.
It was written, there was written by survivors of the last disaster in Egypt. The Israelites told the truth. Moses accurately described the great disasters, but we have amplifying information from the Egyptians who lived in Egypt at that time, who survived and wrote passages of the Colburn Bible and the Ipuwer Papyrus, Ipuwer. You can look that up. That's at the Museum of Leiden, Leyden, in the Netherlands. That Ipuwer Papyrus describes great disasters that occurred on Earth at the time of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. God created these disasters. And they talk about in the Colburn, I can paraphrase some of the things. They say the stars appeared to be swirling in space. Well, the stars were not moving. It was Earth that was going into a wobble, getting ready for a pole shift. It's like a top. When a top is spinning and it begins to slow down, it no longer is erect, remains erect in its spin, but because it's slowing down, it begins to wobble, it loses its balance. And eventually, if this top goes slowly enough, it will topple over. So that's what they wrote about in the Colburn Bible, how the stars began to whirl around in space.
Okay.
And that's basically it.
All right, and I've got some more questions here. Daryl says he's got 3 questions here, so I'll give it to you right off here. He says, question for the guest, what type of cosmic event could turn this planet into a molten planet, and does the guest know or have an idea of what is beneath the radiation ring that surrounds our sun? And he says, is there an idea of the temperature beneath the radiation ring?
Oh, I don't know much. The radiation ring that surrounds our sun, I'm not familiar with that. Okay. I know that the sun, if he's referring to something close to the sun, within the limited distance between the sun and Mercury, I believe. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but there is a lot of a negative electron cloud. And that's the only radiation that I would know about. I'm not an expert on solar science.
All right. And what about
the basics?
What about a window of time for the passing of this brown dwarf? Cosmic is listening and asked, is there a time frame of when we can expect?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the Bible is our best source, I believe. God said that he indeed was bringing Planet X to mankind, the great disasters to mankind, in order to shock the human race into recognizing their Creator. And in so doing, fear is a great motivator. Fear is what causes people to cry out to God and to pray to God. And this is what God wants, because he wants us to have eternal life. Okay, so the Bible is God, the one who claims to be hurling this planet at us. This brown dwarf star of destruction is God himself throughout the Bible, the Old and New Testament. So I think we can get our timeline best from there, because nobody knows the future better than the Creator of this universe. And what he says is, here are the signs you're going to see. You're going to see wars and rumors of wars, great wars and great destruction that will kill 1/4 of humankind. There's going to be various methods of killing 1/4. That's what is the Earth is roughly populated with about 7 billion people right now. So 1/4 of 7 billion would be what, roughly 1.7 billion. Yeah, somewhere around there. So what God is saying is 1.7 billion people will be killed by a war, and we see that coming up. Our friend Wolfgang, who just called in, mentioned something about a World War III scenario being set up. I wish I could talk to him more about that. He said it was somebody who was a remote viewer went looked remotely. The Army is supposedly doing remote viewing, so there must be some truth to it, some value to remote viewing, which is basically looking into the future.
Yeah.
And what he found is remote viewer, according to Wolfgang the caller, said that he went into the year 2130 and looked back, and he said that there was a nuclear war sometime, what it was, in the 21st century. And I think that's what they're setting up now. They're setting up conditions for a nuclear war. So there's some of your first signs. And I mentioned January 31st. The diabolical ruling elite are sadistic in the sense, and also they like to test us too. They have a way of telling us what they're going to do in a very cryptic, mysterious way. You're probably familiar with this, Michael, where they told us about 9/11, the coming 9/11 disaster.
Oh, yeah.
In numerous ways. On the X-Files, lone gunman series, that was quite blatant. Where someone crashing a plane into the World Trade Center. This was done months before the 9/11 attacks. And then there was a musical group who had a music album with a picture of the Twin Towers on it. And then the Simpsons cartoons, that's where they have a lot of CIA input to the Simpsons cartoon writers who put that 9/11 code up on. Bart Simpson was holding up a ticket or something, and on it was clearly labeled 9 with the 2 Twin Towers next to the right of the 9.
That's right. Yeah,
and spelling out 9/11.
And John,
and in a movie Back to the Future 3. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say we've got another call here, and so if you don't mind, let's take this last call, and then we'll go ahead and finish up with that. 831 area code. You're on Late Night in the Midlands. First name, where you're calling from.
Yes, sir. This is Wolfgang again. I just wanted to clarify, if I may, very quickly, that the USS Eldridge, circa 1943, the Nikola Tesla joint Einstein invisibility experiment, Al Bielek was one of the gentlemen who died in 2012 who jumped off the side of the ship with some other gentleman. I forgot his name. He was the gentleman who wound up going through a time portal as part of the invisibility process in specifically 3743, and then into coming back for 6 weeks. The NSA pulled him back in 1992 through a time loop with the machine they have based in Area 51 to 2137. And when he was in the hospital for 6 weeks, you can find these YouTube videos regarding Al Bielek. When he was in that hospital, he was shown a map of the U.S. and it had changed, very akin to the U.S. Navy map that we all are familiar with that came out in 1987. So my point being is that it was Al Bielek who actually jumped off the side of the USS Eldridge, wound up in these 2 time spots. The NSA pulled him back. He was age regressed with the technology they still have today, which we know they're using. And that was that. I wanted to mention one more thing, sir, and that is I'm very familiar with Joe Brandt, 1937, falling off the horse, hitting his head, winding up in downtown Hollywood. There's another person named Sarah Manette, 1979. She was in a coma, and she saw very similar information. I'm sorry, go ahead.
How do you spell that last name? Sarah?
Manette. Sarah Manette. She was in New York in a car accident. M-E-N-E-T. M-E-N-E-T. Sarah Manette, 1979, or maybe 1976.
M-E-N-E-T. M-E-N-E-T.
Yes, and specifically, I believe it was the Zeta Reptilians. They pulled her out of body. They showed her different snapshots of the future on a certain timeline, possibly the timeline that we're on now. And it's all kind of leading up to the World War III scenario, and then the...
When do you think this World War III scenario? See, the woman asked before, what's the timeline for this Planet X destruction? Well, they're going to have a war before it happens.
And just for the record,
it's almost inevitable that they will create a war before the Planet X destruction occurs, and that's the prophets have stated this, including prophets of the Bible, that there'll be a war, there'll be famine, horrible war, which will kill many, many people, more than ever before. Famine that will kill so many people, and also there will be earthquakes in diverse places.
Right, and I just want to let the caller know I didn't hang up on him. I don't know what happened. We lost him, but thanks for calling in with that information. And John, you're right. Before we finish up here tonight, I'm done. I'm not going to take any more calls tonight. But you're right that we do see these things, and I'll tell you, it's hard to overlook these things, like what you mentioned with The Simpsons and all this other stuff. It really is difficult. You think, how do they know about this? But it seems like they do.
Everything is planned. Former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was a major frontman for the diabolical ruling elite, for the Illuminati. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is quoted as saying, in politics, nothing happens by accident. Everything is planned. Now, this movie, not only the Simpsons know, but the Simpsons, the movie Back to the Future Part 3, and many people have put YouTubes up about Back to the Future Parts 1 and 2, where they showed lots of evidence indicating they were predicting that the 9/11 attacks would occur. You just go to YouTube and look up Back to the Future 3 and 9/11. You'll see a lot of stuff. And not only Back to the Future 3, but actually Back to the Future 1 and 2 talked about 9/11 as well as 3. But now I see something. I see January 31st as a possible. I don't want to even pretend that I know it's going to happen. It's just a possibility. January 31st, false flag attack that may trigger the coming war that is planned. They have to have a war before these natural disasters occur. Okay. Whenever there's a great disaster like they're taking down the economy, destroying the economy, they always have a war. This is historically proven. The war is the cover, and it's a way of knocking, like one great CIA officer once said, it's a way of clearing the entire monopoly board. When they're going to have a financial disaster, you clear a monopoly board, and you have a big war and start the whole game all over again. So this game is not going to start all over again when Planet X comes in, because God is going to prevent it from recurring. But the point is, the war is being planned, and I see possibility now. Just check into it. Back to the Future Part 3 has a big train action scene, very tense scene with a train ride at the end, and on the train is black and white letters on a black background, is the number 131. That might signify January 31st, maybe. Go look at it, check it out. And with the 131, I seem to see, I caught some frames that have the Illuminati pyramid on the train. It's like a glowing pyramid inside, right below the smokestack, for a few frames, maybe for about 5 or 6 seconds or more, 10 seconds possibly. And I look at it, stopped the frames, stopped it so I could look at it very clearly, and it sure looks like an Illuminati pyramid. Right next to the big letters 131 in white letters written on a black background. Now, white on black is always an Illuminati or Freemason symbology. You see all these satanic females like Madonna, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and doing their TV shows. They had one famous one with Madonna was all dressed in black and the other two girls were in white. They always watch your TV specials. You'll see the black and white contrast, which is symbolizing the worship of Satan. Now, Satanism is another. As your female caller called in and said, what are some of the signs? that Planet X is coming, you will see Satanism rising rapidly.
And it is.
That's one of the signs. Satanism. People with tattoos all over their bodies.
Well, and it is, John, because you're seeing now where they're allowing schools, elementary schools, to hold devil worshipping or satanic type classes. I don't know if you've seen that. So yeah, it is.
No, I'm shocked.
Yeah, I forget where it is, but they say that they have the right, and I would say, okay, well, why wouldn't you put that in the book with religion? And they, you're not allowed to have some Christian class in a public school, so why are you allowed to do that? But that's what they'll do. That's what they allow now. And then you've got, of course, the TV show that glamorizes Satan. I've heard many people complain about that one. What was it called? Lucifer? So
yes.
Yeah, it's quite a bit going on.
You're right, absolutely right. And Michael, the hand signs are so blatant, that satanic hand signs where they take they make the OK sign or whatever it is. You take the index finger and curl it to meet the thumb, so you're making an O, creating an O with the index finger and the thumb, while the remaining three fingers are raised up in the air. Now that's a 666 symbol that's very commonly known to be 666. They're doing that all the time, and whenever they do that, they're worshiping Satan for power. Remember, they have to worship Satan in order to maintain their power. That's why all these musical groups do it, because they put up the finger, the index finger extended, and the satanic horns, the devil's horns. The index finger extended, the pinky finger extended, with the middle two fingers curled inward, so that you have the devil's horns. You'll see that all the time. I saw that in the movie Rock of Ages, not the movie, but the stage show in New York, Rock of Ages. They were flashing that sign blatantly throughout that entire music.
All right, and John, I hate to do this, but we're down. I mean, we've got about a minute left, and I want to give you an opportunity to get out anything you like, websites, where your show, anything you want to drive people to. And I thank you so much for being back on the show, and look forward to doing this again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Michael. Yeah, we can do this again. My email is contact me. Maybe we can get together and have people commune with God, because God is our only hope against all these horrors that are coming. So my email address is, I wish it were easier, but it's J-A-Dinardo, J-A-D-I-N-A-R-D-O, the name Dinardo, J-A-D-I-N-A-R-D-O at optonline.net. That's OPTONLINE.net. You see, email me, and maybe we can organize something where we can commune with God, because God is our only hope against all this evil and destruction that is coming to earth.
All right.
Spiritual and his prophecies like Joe Brandt, B-R-A-N-D-T, where he in 1937, Joe Brandt fell off a horse, like your caller was saying, and he had these going in and out of consciousness in the hospital. He predicted, one of the things he said, he saw somebody that I think is Donald Trump, President Trump, on the front page of a newspaper just before this great earthquake in California, the great earthquake that's coming in California. He saw a president that he said was heavier and has bigger ears than President Roosevelt. Well, that might be President Trump, who might be the president during when this great earthquake occurs in California.
Well, if
Joe Brandt's vision, B-R-A-N-D-T.
I would assume that we're going to see a big one within the next 4 years, so he probably will be the president when it happens. So maybe that is something prophetic. And John, again, I thank you. We've got another show coming up, so I believe me, I could go another 3 hours, but I can't, because we have another show about to come on here.
Michael.
All right, thank you so much, John, and I've got you linked up on the website. I'll put your link in with the archive tonight as well, so people could get to you. And I thank you.
Well, thank you for all your help, Michael.
All right. Have a great night, John, and keep up the great work, my friend.